Stephen, welcome to studio.
Thank you.
The last few decades have seen massive urbanization and growth of cities in Africa, something akin to what Europe went through in the 1600s and 1700s. What has that meant from an urbanization of Africa?
What took Europe 300 years to achieve, Africa is achieving it in less than 5 decades. Kinshasa adds about 50 people to its population every hour. Johannesburg adds 5 people to its population every hour. Lagos is adding 42 people to its population every hour. And what we've seen is massive urbanization across the African continent. Some cities are growing faster than others, but what we are seeing is the emergence of mega cities in Africa. We know that by 2050, this would be about 2.3 billion people, mostly located in cities. And that's going to eclipse both the populations of Latin America and Europe.
The difference, I guess, with Africa is we often speak of, in one country, one major city. Are we seeing the growth of other second-tier cities as well?
We've seen smaller cities growing, secondary towns growing as well. And even in South Africa, it's not just the big cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town, but a series of smaller other cities that are growing at arguably sometimes quicker rates, but smaller populations.
If we look at sub-Saharan Africa specifically, massive colonial history, which has also impacted the spatial planning of those cities. How has that now been addressed with the influx of people?
It's added a new level of complexity and it's added a new level of challenge. On the one hand, we really have to rewrite the story of the city different to our colonial past. And the way in which we do that in the real instrument is urban planning. And how we think about African cities really is about understanding not just addressing the injustices of the past, but really looking towards building a new platform for cities.
Let's look at some of the challenges that are being faced by African cities as they grow.
Massive challenges, huge informal economies. We know that 62% of all gross national product in Africa is generated by the informal economy. But challenges with that economy in terms of regulation, in terms of informalization, and also the protection of workers who work in that economy. The other big challenge is around resources, not enough land, not enough electricity, not enough water. And so the environmental challenge is also something that's looming in African cities. So both on the economy side and the environmental side, there's a range of challenges around sustainability that African cities will face now and into the future.
We saw in South Africa recently xenophobic attacks, which are more linked to social cohesion as well. That aspect of urbanization, is that being addressed?
No. There's a considerable amount of work that needs to be done. We often, as urban practitioners, think of building the city in terms of bricks and mortar. But really what we're looking at building is a social fabric. And social cohesion is critical to not just building a shared identity of people living in the same place, but is critical in terms of urban peace, stability, and critical in terms of what urban democracies are essentially wanting to achieve. A sense of unity, a sense of shared identity, and a sense that this is a city in which everyone belongs. And there's some interesting peace models around urban reconstruction in Rwanda, for example, that we could lend on.
You mentioned that this urbanization is unprecedented, but what's also unprecedented is the amount of tools and technology available to assist urban planners, big data, smart cities. How much of that are we incorporating into the new African cities?
We've seen the convergence of all sorts of different ways of thinking, including new ways of engineering cities, new technologies. And it's beginning to start to coalesce together. You add the technology together with an understanding of cities and how they work, engineering, artists, scientists, and you bring them all together, and you see new innovations around city development. And that presents a really, really exciting way to problem solve some of the environmental, social, economic problems facing African cities.
You mentioned Rwanda, for example. Where else have we seen innovations that are specific or particular to the African continent?
We've seen interesting innovations in places like Nigeria, Lagos. They've just put in their new bus rapid transit system. And it's really a light bus rapid transit system that is really, really basic, but is able to carry huge volumes of commuters every single day. So they've created new ways of carving through lanes through the city, as well as energy efficient buses. And they're really starting to innovate on the urban mobility transport side.
On top of the innovation, I guess there's opportunities for infrastructure development, business development and employment creation.
If we can figure out how to address the issue of informality. And there it becomes really, really exciting, because the last 300 years of city building across Europe and North America is really been run by a kind of ordered, formal system of planning run by engineers and architects and people like myself, town planners. The new decade is more about how do you work collaboratively as part of networks.
What kind of cities can we expect to see in the next 50, 100 years in Africa?
I think the kind of cities are going to be the cities that we haven't seen before. It's hard to predict into the future, but what we do know is that they're going to be cities built on a different kind of understanding and a different kind of platform, and that's largely around a platform that creates a shared sense of identity. They're going to be far more fluid, they're going to be far more dynamic, they're going to be far more pedestrian and user-focused, and they're going to be far more about people and planning people around cities.
And what's happening with the rural areas where a lot of these people are migrating from?
We're going to have to feed cities, and we're going to have to create agricultural economies that actually support large urban populations. So the inevitable decline of the rural area, I think, is not something that inevitably is going to happen.
Stephen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.